So good afternoon, or good morning. What are we? 10:30 in the morning. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this particular session. So what I'm wanting to do, I will just look to the right-hand side for anyone else that joins us as we go along. What I'm wanting to do is through this session is to hopefully in the 90 minutes that we spend together, give you a bit of an overview around 13 key areas that I've identified. And I'll give you some background as to how I came to create this checklist. But yesterday I spent a full day on I'm just going to, sorry, Wendy's asking for, Wendy, the link. I sent it in the email this morning. So I'm going to pop, there you go. I'm just sending through in the chat. In the chat, the PDF is sitting there now. So please make sure you've got that PDF and we're going to work through that as we go. So I spent all of yesterday updating the checklist to make sure that it was ready for the 2025 next tranche of changes. Now, those next tranche comes in next week, and we're talking Tuesday next week. And there are a couple of things I'm sure that you had a look at CAV. Their website, there are a couple of things which were scheduled to start next week that have now been put on hold. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to go through with you is that gone are the days where we have one set of rules and that those rules stay the same. We're constantly changing, and it's really important that we adapt to that. So what I've got, I actually started out when I had this originally was 130 points on the checklist. By the time I finished yesterday and took into account all of the new changes, the reforms, and I've broken up the checklist. We're now sitting at 218 points. So what I'm wanting you to do is please make sure you've got the document printed, and we're going to work through that as we go. I'm sitting in the chat as well. So what will we cover? There's 13 areas within the business that if I was to come in and do a health check, these are the things that I'd be looking for. And so the objective of this particular presentation is that you can go in and do the same sort of DIY health check that I would do in your business, but you can do it yourself. So we're going to discuss some of the changes. I'm not going to sit here and show you any of the sections. That's been done to death over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I was at the REIV last week. We had the director of CAV. Just make sure if everyone's on mute. We're the director of CAV for the task force. We also had members of the RDRV and VCAT coming along, and they were speaking. And there was still some confusion even at CAV. And there's a couple of things I'll share with you as I go through today as to they hadn't even thought of. So the unintended consequences. So even though we're scheduled to make the changes on the 25th, CAV still had not finalised a couple of the things from their end, and as a result, they've now gone and pushed those back. Portable bonds is next year. The Form 4, the prescribed application form, that's going to be pushed back out to next year because that's not ready. So what steps can you take to make sure that you are match fit? So I'm going to say, what are we, the 20th of November? We're the end of the 2025. There's not a hell of a lot that you can do between now and Christmas, except there's about 4 weeks left that if you have the time, the resources, the energy, and the capacity, this is a great time to make sure that you can start for your 2026 planning. Now, what I tend to see is that people see, and I've already received a couple of messages like this. People say, oh, I can't do anything now. I have to do it next year. You're just kicking the can down the road. So what I would suggest is if you have an opportunity to today, it's a great time to go through, do a bit of a health check, get an understanding of what's working well and what's not. So what to inform your rental providers and educate them about the risks, responsibilities, and also further changes, what evidence you need to have on file, clear steps you can implement in the next 90 days to increase the compliance levels. So what I'm talking about with compliance, I'm talking about making sure that as of next week, if CAV were to knock on your door, that you are match fit, you're ready, you're compliant, you're not worried. we'll also go through and complete the checklist. So again, making sure that you've got that checklist. So this isn't a webinar where I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you and it's one way. Although I'm not asking to make it interactive, we would never get this done. This particular session that I've built, it was a 3 hour workshop that I did in offices. And so what we would do, and I'll show you a couple of pictures in a second, where every person would have the checklist. I would have the screen. I would stand at the front. We do 3 hours. We butchers paper all of the different areas. So when we come to category one, each table would have a piece of butcher's paper, and we start to get some ideas. And we build out a workflow, a planning, a strategy document. And this is how this all came to pass. So this is really important. It does require you to get involved and participate. So these are the areas that I work in from a business point of view. So you know that this is what I'm doing every day. This is what I'm struggling with from a compliance or a consultant or a training point of view. What I'm struggling with is the number of officers that are still sitting here today, 5 years, almost 5 years. In March next year, we're 5 years in, still sitting here today saying we're not quite ready for the changes that were implemented in 2021. Now, why I've got it inside of here, it's been 5 years since the introduction of the major changes, so almost 5 years, but we've had 13 different rounds of changes since. Next week will be 14. Early next year, when they come up with the application, and then we've got the portable bonds coming next year into, I think, October, there's still more bills before Parliament that are being put forward to continue this change. We're not going to stop seeing change up until I think it's the 2030, which is when the last of the changes that are already scheduled now are coming in. So change is a constant now. It's going to continue. But what I'm struggling with and with the officers is that there's so many agencies, there's still so many owners that still think that minimum standards are optional, still think that gas, smoke, electric is optional, still don't understand what the sections of the Act are. And there's so many agents that are struggling with this. So this little checklist will help you. Back in 2024, in March, the state government put the industry and owners on notice. There's our favourite Premier. And they came out with the rental task force. Now, as I said, the director of the task force was at the REOV last week. I emceed the event. We had 170 property managers there, and even the director of the task force and the head of the task force, who was in the audience as well, they struggled with some of the practical applications of questions that we had. Now, the government spent $4 million. They didn't like me talking about that. The government spent $4 million to put together the task force. I think so far they've recovered about $950,000 in fines. I'm not saying it should be a like for like, it shouldn't be. But what is happening is there are a lot of good agencies that are just not switched on or making errors that are being fined. And then some of the agencies that we all know, I see a lot of them that we all know that really are the ones that are bringing the industry down. They're the ones that are getting away with things. They're probably also the ones that you're losing managements to, where an owner says, my other agent doesn't ask me for all of these things. Why are you? So in March of 2024, the government came out and said, as an industry, and I'm paraphrasing here, as an industry, you guys aren't getting yourselves together. As an industry, you're not following what the rules are, so we'll create a task force to go out there and double check and make sure that you are. Now, the task force has had an impact. These little kids here, the reasons why I put them here are really, really important there. I've went on to Google and I searched 5-year-old preschool kindergarten. 5-year-old. They're little humans. And the same time that the Act was created and changed back in 2021, these little kids were born. And so we can't be sitting here and saying, and these are some of the excuses that I get, and I do hear them, we've been busy. I leave it, and this is one that I get often from sales-based principals who aren't heavily involved in their PM team. I've just left it up to my property managers, isn't that their job? And that annoys me because it's not. I think it's the principal's responsibility to make sure that the business is compliant, has good systems, has strategies, has training, and then the property managers can actually do the tasks. But it's not a property manager's role to be doing this. It's not a property manager's role to be creating all of the strategy. That's what department managers, directors, seniors, principals are should be doing, in my opinion. The other one is there's too many changes all at once. The owners don't want to pay for the extra expense. I don't know how many times I've heard that. My owner doesn't want to pay for whatever. Insert here. The owner signed the rental minimum standards form. Isn't that fine? I spoke with a principal last week and I said to him, "What do you do for the rental minimum standards?" He goes, "All my owners have signed a form." I said, "Great. But you're the one that's in the property. You're the one that's actually seeing whether the locks are right, whether the window blinds are full block out, whether the lighting's right, whether there's mold. You're doing that, not the owner." And he said, "Yes, but all my owners are signed off, so I'm fine." It's a real false economy, that one. Our competitors aren't enforcing the rules and we don't want to lose management. My property managers have told me we will be okay. I don't know how many times I've heard that. I asked a principal, I spoke with a principal last week, sorry, a head of department last week, 4,000 properties, and I was staggered. They're charging the tenants a break lease, sorry, not a break lease, a rent transfer fee instead of charging the owners. Here's the booklet, here's the checklist, and again, it was 130, it was 14 pages, it was 130 points. As of yesterday, I've updated that. This is the live session that I've been one of that I ran, and it was a group. We had 3,300 properties, there were 10 offices, and I was training the whole group. So I put together the strategy. This is what it looked like with the butcher's paper. Each table was working through their concept and their ideas. And then what we did is we put together a plan. And that plan, once we had our to-dos, each office was very different. Once we had our to-do list, we then put that into Trello boards. So we took our butcher's paper notes. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because this is exactly what you can do. Go to Officeworks, grab some butcher's paper, write these little headings out, the same as I've got them there. You can pull this out. I'd love to be able to facilitate it for you. I think you'll get a better outcome. Or you can do this yourself. I would welcome the opportunity to come into your business, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you here are the tools that I'm using. If you can use those in your business, you will be so much further ahead of your competitors. And you'll also be able to then document all of this. So if Cav do walk in, as has happened with some of the offices I've worked with, we can sit down and we can show them our training program. We can show them our strategy. We can show them all the things that we're working on. We can show them all the things that were and that we've changed. So what they're looking for is they're looking for evolution. They're looking for change. They're looking for initiative. And this is what we do. We then went and built this out. You can do this as well. If you've got a VA, take your notes. Of course, you can engage me to do this. We've already done it. What we did was we took the notes and we said, okay, category one, here's the question, and then that becomes part of our health check. And so this is a really good way. And so for the 12 months, and I did this 3 years ago or so with a particular group. For 12 months, we worked through this on every one of our property management training sessions. We worked through and we just chipped away at little things from this checklist that were able to actually help us out. And again, we just use Trello. If you've got a VA, instruct them to build you your Trello boards exactly the same as this. So my question to you is, how prepared are you? Let's just go through this. Hopefully now that everyone's got a copy of the PDF printed, what I'd like you to do, here's mine here. You can see that hopefully. And if you wanted to just go through, we'll answer the questions as we can. The objective here is that if it's a yes, then tick a yes. If it's a no, tick a no. If it's a not applicable to your particular department, then put the NA. But what I want you to do, I want you to be very harsh. I want you to look at this and say, if I'm asking if it's a yes, it needs to be a rock solid, non-negotiable, absolute yes. It's not an amber. It's not a close to. So what we're using the traffic light system. So the no, red, yes, green. There is no in between. It's either it's done, it's ready, you're happy with it, or then it's a no, you're not happy with it. So, what I'd like you to do now is if we start working through this checklist, I'll read the questions out. And if you can just go and put in, it's either an NA, a yes, or a no. Now, for all of these, you should have something. So, for the agencies that either use Inspection Express, or Vic Forms, ADL forms, Flick It Over, wherever you get your forms, even if you've got one that's been created from a solicitor, I don't really mind. You might have written one yourself. What I would suggest you don't do, though, and I've seen this very often, is go into Vic Forms and then copy theirs because there's some privacy issues around that. I've seen that many, many times. But if you're using a particular template, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Is there a separate document for each of the following templates? And this should be an easy yes, no. Do you have an exclusive leasing managing authority with a detailed level of service and a detailed ancillary fee schedule? Yes, no. You should be yes. Now, you should have your own, but if you're just using a standard Inspection Express form, then it won't be an exclusive. Do you have a detailed owner's form, including authority to sign, electronic consent, and written bank details? Yes, no. Property Safety Inspection Authority, authorising the agency to manage the inspections. I'll come to that in a little bit later, but you should have your own individual document, one for you as the agency. If you're using Detector Inspector, Smart House, RICS, Task Force, and they've sent out the authority and the owner has ticked yes for Detector Inspector to do it, then you're ticking no for this particular answer. A rental minimum standards declaration form from the rental provider to the agency stating that the property complies with all the 15 standards. So, do you have a form that is a rental minimum standards declaration? If the answer is yes, tick it. A detailed disclosure form from the applicant. We all should be using a disclosure form, even if you're still using the old REIV tick and flick one. I wouldn't suggest that because that was applicable a couple of years ago. It's not applicable now, but do you have a particular form? The next question to that one, and we'll get through that in a sec. The next question is, are you sending them out for every rental agreement? Are you sending them out for every lease renewal? Are you sending them out for every lease break and every renter transfer? The answer often is no. But for this particular one, do you have the forms? Simply, we're looking at prescribed forms, file audits, and document storage. Has each template been fully customized to comply with the agency fees, service standards, and owner's authority instructions? Why would I ask that? Because often when I'm going into offices, I'm seeing that they're still using the standard fees that they might have had a couple of years ago, or they're using, if you're using Inspection Express, you might still be using the one pager that was the template in Inspection Express. The fee schedules that I build into offices is a 6-page fee schedule. Now, I'm happy to chat with you about that later, about how to implement that as a fee strategy. It's one of the questions later on I ask. But I certainly get those fees. And it's interesting, when I first start pitching to an office, they all say to me, my owners will never pay that. Then we start implementing it slowly, and we find that they will actually pay for it. Has the ancillary fee schedule been updated and modified to reflect the current agency fees and appropriate allocation of GST? The main one is this next point. Has the renter assignment or transfer fee been noted correctly in the fee schedule and the rental agreement template? And is the owner being charged this fee first with an expectation of reimbursement from the renter? So hopefully I'd like to think we've got a lot of the yeses so far. Now, again, when I spoke to that office last week, H would have been no 4,000 times. So has the renter and assignment fee been correctly put into the fee schedule? No, they were just charging the agent, just charging the renter, which is a $11,500 fine if caught. So it's certainly worthwhile to make sure you get yourself in order. For the agencies that have created their own suite of templates, were these documents created after March of 2021? Again, there are a few changes after that date that you need to incorporate into your suite of templates. But more importantly, have they been updated in the last, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? If not, then the answer is no. And so even if you've been working on old managing agency authorities, if you've been working on old owners instruction forms, I would be changing those now, or at least using version control to make sure that you can comfortably comfortably acknowledge that they're current with the next changes, the rental reforms. Since the introduction of the major changes, again, we're going back 5 years ago, has there been a thorough owner and property document audit on every property under management? Now, if you can answer yes to this one, I'll come to your webinar. And the reason I say that is because whenever I'm invited into and have the honor of being invited into an office to go through the amount of things that I find that are right underneath the noses of really good people. But when I find them, I come through and I say, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's that. It's always a little bit of shock. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. Or, yeah, I sort of knew that, but I wasn't 100% sure. Or we've never really looked at that. And so what we're looking for are the documents compliant, valid, enforceable, and assignable. The amount of due diligences that I do where the documents are okay, but certainly no one would buy them. Is there an internal process to record and create accurate reports or lookups to identify the compliant, non-compliant, missing, invalid, incomplete, or expired documents? So if you're using a platform, a major platform, maybe a Property Me, a Tree, a Colmeo, Console, whatever it is that you're using, Our Property, Managed, there's so many at the moment, ALO, whatever it is that you're using, can you go into your portfolio today with a degree of 20 seconds, can you bring up a report that says all of the managing agencies authorities that are assignable? And if the answer is no, then you're ticking no. Can you go in and find out all of the ones that have a missing owner's instruction form? Do you have that now? If the answer is no, put no. So what we're looking for now is how good is the data entry into and the document storage, how good is it in our system? If you've got a couple, then you're putting no, because we're looking at overall. Is there a structured external cloud-based portfolio folder that's sitting off to the side, not your platform, not your Property Me, Tree, Colmeo, ALO? The documents that are saved in there, that's okay. Save some documents in there, but all of your documents should be saved in an external drive. Why? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one, and if you're not doing this now, then I would suggest you fix it real quick, like as in today. And that is, if you were to lose access to your platform today, you stop paying your subscription, or you sold the rent roll, or for whatever reason, as an agency, you still have an obligation to have access to those for 7 years. So that's the first one. If you do sell the rent roll, you've either going to have to pay for a subscription for 7 years or print everything off before you close out. Or you won't have access to that information for 7 years because the platforms no longer allow you a view only. You have to pay a subscription. So every document that you have should be in a cloud-based system. Gone are the days where we're running filing cabinets, and also you should not be running anything locally on a server. No one has servers anymore. So it's all cloud-based, it's sitting there with a backup, but you've got to be mindful of the protections around those. So let's just see how we went. So I've got a couple more questions here. Is there an internal auditing process where another senior manager or a department manager randomly audits the property manager's activities at the end of each month? So like are you using workflows? Are you using checklists? Are you using jot forms? Are you using a tick and flick form? Whatever it is that you're using, is someone going in and overseeing randomly, we're not micromanaging, but randomly selecting particular tasks. Like is someone going in and having a look at a lease renewal from one of your PMs and saying, okay, well, these things are doing really well, but you forgot the disclosure. These things are really well for a rent review, but where's the CMA? These are really well from a rent review, but we don't have electronic consent with the renter. And so we're trying to manage those things. Is that happening now? If not, implement some stringent workflows. Are you currently using a VA or a team to outsource and manage the document compliance, auditing process, workflows, and those sorts of things, and rent roll growth instead of the PMs? If not, then by all means. So let's just go through and tally up. Where are you sitting at the moment? I made a couple of numbers inside of there, 2, 4, and 8. How are you sitting? And we'll go to the next one. So from a prescribed forms, a document, an auditing process, that's number one. How are you sitting and going so far? Are you feeling comfortable? My proposition to you is now is a really, really good time to be able to go through and do a full fee update, full agency authority update, because you can then, I won't say blame, but you can use the fact that there's further reforms as to the reasons why we want to get through with these documents. Okay, so the next one, rate yourself. As a general rule, 0 to 10. How did you go with the first area? And I can see Joseph's gone and put in there 12 out of 14. We might have a chat about those numbers. I think when I said to you, you need to be really stringent, we might be a little bit light on those. Internal audit category number 2. Internal procedures, internal systems, forms, operational standards, and workflows. So let's just go through this one. I don't need to see your numbers, but at the end, I'd be really keen to get an understanding of how you've gone. So please don't sit here and just say, I'll come back to that later on. Do it now whilst we're going through, because it's fresh in your mind, and there'll be some things that I talk about that you will maybe trigger a response. So, number 2, internal procedures. Do you have a written and documented internal procedures? Do you have written and documented internal procedures, systems, minimum operation standards, checklists, workflows for all property management tasks? And I'm not talking about a couple. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 little Word document tick flick checklist. I'm talking about for all of your tasks. Do you have an intranet? Do you have a Google Drive? I use Trello, or some people use Airtable or a Monday, those sorts of areas. Do you have everything that's actually written out? So my question to you is this: if I was a brand new property manager coming to start work with you today, how would I know how your office does whatever task? And if the answer is, well, we're hiring people so they should know, that's not good enough, because they're going to bring what their experiences are from other agencies now into your agency. And so my proposition to you is that if you've got really good, strong standard procedures for all tasks written, easy to follow, helps with performance management, but also helps with onboarding, helps with making sure that there's consistent levels of service for a whole range of things. So do you have them? I would suggest, in my experience going through lots of offices, many offices would be ticking no to that one. With the introduction of further reforms next week and regulations to the minimum standards, have each of your internal procedures, onboarding, manuals, systems, and workflows been updated to ensure that they comply with the changes? Now, this is what I do full time, but even my systems, I've got over 1,200 systems sitting inside of a Trello board. Even my systems, I haven't gone through all of those to add to the next range of changes, because there's so many changes that they're ongoing. So I'd be ticking no for myself. Do you have version control on all your procedures? What does version control mean? It means that every one of you'll see on the bottom of the document, I've got V4 2025. If you have a look at the bottom page of the document where the numbers are, that's version control. So we've had 3 previous versions before this one. The first one of these checklists was 2021. Then we went to a 2022. Then we fixed up a 2024, and now we're on to version 4 2025. So if I'm sending out documents, I know that I'm able to then turn around and reference that all the documents that we're all working on this particular version. Okay, version control. Do you have them on all documents? If the answer is no, tick no. Have each of the owner documents, internal forms, emails, and letter templates, checklists, renter applications been updated to confirm they comply with the next phase of reforms? So as we know, just as an example, 2 of the real big ones are that our 60-day notices for both rent increases and all of our notice to vacates have now gone to 90 days. VCAT hub's been changed. So are your emails to renters, if a renter sent you a notice to vacate yesterday or today, is it saying that you've got 60 days notice, or is it saying that it's got 90? Have you updated all of those? If you haven't, then these are the things to do. And so your no's, the section here where we've got no, what that's going to eventually become is your to-do list. It's your planning document over the next 4 to 5 weeks through as we lead into Christmas and then into the new year. You can then sit here and say, this is your strategy, this is your to-do, it is the best way for you to sit down and identify your risks and your actions that you need. And then you can either create a little mini business plan, a working group, a committee, and then start to put all these things together. But I would certainly not just be popping this checklist into a folder somewhere and then not coming back to it. If you're saying no, you have to go through all of your emails. Even if you are using a standard Property Me tree console and they've got all the emails, have you checked them? If the answer is no, then make sure that you go through and update those. Do you have version control on all internal forms? Have you got that? If not, then we need to make sure, and this one's the next one, so question 11, we need to make sure that we've got version control. So we know that all of our templates are up to date and that they've been checked for this round of compliance. So with my versions of Inspection Express templates, I think I'm sitting at version 14 for the managing agency authority, which means that there's been 13 other iterations of that or examples of that prior to the one that I'm using. If I go in and make more changes, then it'll be version 15, and then I always put the month inside of there. It's really, really important so you can actually keep track to make sure that you know which documents you're using. Then what I would do is I would suggest that those documents would sit inside of a Trello, an intranet, a Dropbox, or Google Drive. I don't care where you sit them. And then all the staff need to use those documents. Why is that important? Well, I reckon if I went to most team members' desks on their dashboard, on their screen, there'll be a particular form that they use all the time. They might have saved it in an email. They might have their own folder. They might have a folder called Michael, and all the documents that I use regularly sit in there, and I'll keep referring to those. And the problem with that is that as the agency updates documents, all of the ones that are in the Michael folder will still be a previous version. But you wouldn't know that there's changes unless you're using version control. Hopefully I've explained that. Do you have a series of electronic checklists, jot forms, workflows, Trello checklists, or editable PDFs for all important property management tasks for staff to use as a part of their daily activities? Ideally, these checklists will be used when conducting the ongoing random audits. Now, some of these you can use inside of your workflows. Some of these you can set up inside of your platform. Some would have to be maybe a Trello. Some will have to be maybe a PDF or something like this. You just create them. Even if it's just a Word document, you need to have some form of order or structure to develop consistency throughout. And again, your property managers are looking for that. What they're not looking for is every day there's a new task. I have to create new, because if I have to create new all the time, it's very time consuming. It's incredibly tiresome. But then what happens is there's so much room for risk and error or omission, sometimes deliberately, sometimes accidentally. So what we're looking for is if we've got checklists that the agency's put together and says, do you have a specific new onboarding checklist? Yes. So every time there's a new property, it needs to follow that. And it's really easy from a PM or a department manager's point of view to say, can you please bring me that checklist that you used? Might be in Trello, might be in Property Me, and say, why are we missing these things? But at least it gives a framework to work from. Again, certainly helps with performance management of your team. Do you have a specific rental minimum standards compliance checklist? Do you have an advertising compliance checklist? Why is that important? Advertising. Well, as of next week, next Wednesday, from the 26th of November onwards, unless you can produce evidence that you had a reasonable understanding or a reasonable expectation that the property complied with all 15 rental minimum standards. Now, I know that 14 plus the window cleats comes in a week later, but unless you've got a reasonable expectation that all 15 of those standards have been complied with, there should not be an ad online. Just should not be. And so what I'm expecting this current week is all the agencies that are across this will either be pulling down ads because they shouldn't have them up there, Or this week they'll be scrambling to make sure they can get all of their rental minimum standards. So do you have a specific advertising checklist? Now, most offices, and I've been consulting for 10 years, and I've never come across an advertising checklist. I've built one into Property Me, into the workflows there. I used to have it in Trello and for office before Property Me had workflows. And so I would use a Trello checklist and that the PM had to go through all these things. And I would just go back through and say, do you have evidence that the property meets the minimum standards? So I'm laboring on that one because the fine is significant for the agency, and I know that I'm going to find there'll be officers that'll get a fine in the not too distant future. And what will happen is they'll come back and then they'll be screaming about why is this? It's not. It's important. It's unfair. It's unjust. Why am I getting a $59,000 fine? That doesn't make sense. But you've been told, you've been warned. The CAV have been very, very clear. The task force has been very clear. You need to make sure you've got really stringent checklist. Okay, a specific applicant processing checklist, new renter onboarding checklist, transfer of management checklist, rent increase checklist. So let's keep going on those. Do you ever notice to vacate checklist, loss management and archive checklist? This is the new one that's just coming in, specifically with regards to disposal of renter or rental personal information checklist. So for applicants that have been unsuccessful, you've got 30 days to dispose of their bank details, their passport, their driver's license, Medicare cards, any identification that could be used as a form of ID, 100 points of ID. All of that needs to be within 30 days. You need to have a process around that. So if you haven't already spoken to your IRE or your SNUG or your whoever else you've getting your applications through, then you need to do that. But is there a process around this? And these are the things at a department level or a principal level that we need to be certainly across. Do you have a specific notice to vacate checklist? Why is that important? Because the notice to vacate checklist yesterday might have said 60 days, now it says 90 days. Loss management and archive checklist, really, really important. You need to make sure you're archiving things correctly. Because as an officer effective control or principal, we have an obligation to make sure we've got access to those records for 7 years. But 3 years after the end of a tenancy, we have to have another list, which is again I think I've got that a duplicate. We need to make sure I have got that as a duplicate. I'm just having a look through there. No, it's the disposal of the rental information. So that's the one where we've got after 3 years after the end of a lease, end of a tenancy, we need to make sure that we're disposing of the ID information there because we don't want to be another Medibank Private or a Qantas or those sorts of, or an Optus where our data's been breached and then it comes back onto us. The fines are significant in the millions of dollars, not in the thousands of dollars, if you have a data breach and you've not had really good processes for protecting personal information, but more importantly, and as we move towards those who are doing sales next year, there'll be a lot more stringent processes with regards to anti-money laundering, which comes in on the 1st of July next year. Do you have a written and detailed, easy to follow rent review process? Paying attention to the market comps, the CMA. So tick yes on that one or no. The four strikes, have you got that in place? How are we tracking with firstly, how do you track the four strikes, the breaches? How are you tracking the anniversary date for when it starts again, the lease starts again? How are you tracking all that? Are you using labels, tags, spreadsheets? What are you using? Notes, diary notes. Do you have a recorded training video for all internal procedures and workflows and operational standards? If you haven't, do what I'm doing. I've just jumped onto Loom here. It's not Loom, Zoom. Otherwise, I use Loom for all of the videos. It doesn't cost a lot. It's a couple of $100 a year. All training videos. Every time we're running a process, we screenshot it, pop the process in, put a date, not a date, a number. So we've got accurate information. We file. naming convention, and then save that into a little Google Drive as a library. And then all of a sudden, what you're doing is over time, you're starting to build up your how-tos. Why is that important? Brilliant for when you're onboarding someone. And again, performance management. If someone's not doing the right tasks, if they're missing steps, you can just flick them a copy of the video. But you need to be making sure you take the time to put these together. So the question that I ask all the time is, will I ever have to show another person in this task ever again? And if the answer is yes, then what we would do is we'd spend a little bit longer in building it into a system, put it into Trello, put it into OneDrive, Dropbox, wherever it is you want to, build a video, get the transcript, and then take that and get your VA to make that into a standard operational procedure. There is software that you can take a transcript of a Loom video and create it into a SOP and then put it into your system. All of a sudden, you're now starting to create consistency, operational standards, performance review, performance measures. But more importantly, if you ever to go and sell the business and you say, here are all of our standard procedures, this is why we're at this level, this is why we're asking for this amount of money, because we are very organized. You wouldn't go and buy a business that every property manager does their own thing. That's just a disaster. Have these videos been recorded recently and been updated to incorporate the new reforms? So this is why it's important to have version control. If you're sitting here and saying, I recorded a video 3 years ago on how to do a whatever, a widget, this particular task, is that now current? We've had 13 changes to the Residential Tenancies Act in the last 4 years. So is it current with what we're saying? Are the references right? Are the links right? So we want to make sure that we're always updating our information. And again, my position is that this is a principal's responsibility, not a property manager's. Do you run regular weekly property management meeting? Using a structured agenda, discussing the letting activity, vacancy rates, new business, property compliance, minimum standards, to-dos. So minimum standards is really important. I added that in yesterday because it wasn't part of the property management meeting beforehand. But now minimum standards needs to be at the forefront of every PM meeting every week. Because if you don't have the evidence that the property meets the standards, you can't list that property online. Well, you can, but you're going to get caught out. CAV have access to all the back end systems in all of the REA and domain and all the back end portals. So they've got access to go in there and see when properties were listed, when they were moved, what prices they were put in through it. They've had all of that for years. That's how they're tracking all of the underquoting. CAV got direct access to REA and domain. But is the meeting minuted and action items shared amongst the team? Why is it really important to take minutes at the moment? I'll tell you why. Because if you're sitting there and you're the department manager and you're running a property management meeting and you sit there and you say, property X doesn't meet the minimum standards, don't put it online, and then the property manager goes off and does it, or the VA does it, you need to have really strong internal procedures and documented tasks, evidence, minutes to make sure that you can protect yourself, because the fines that if they're applicable are paid by the agency. Your insurance won't pay for these, particularly if you haven't got really stringent processes. So start making sure that there's minutes. Start making sure that they're followed through and that you're not just sending out an action item at the end of each week and nothing gets done with it. Bring it back the following week and get the PM to go through and say, these are the things you're supposed to do. Have you done those? That's the start of your meeting. Otherwise, why have another meeting just to keep adding more and more tasks? Is the meeting designed to allow each team member to contribute to the meeting and report on their portfolio, or is it chaired by one person only? I see and I attend so many property management meetings, and the one person sits at the head of the table and talks for an hour. Everyone sits there in the same seats that they've sat in for the last year with the same coffee mug, sitting there drawing little butterflies on their notepad, and at the end of the 1 hour everyone gets up and goes off, and it's really unproductive, and I see that all the time. So my proposition here is for all meetings is that every person needs to be responsible to report on their key area, and you're, as the person who's heading up the meeting, you're chairing it. You should just chair and facilitate that meeting, offer guidance, but that each individual person in the meeting should be contributing equally. Doesn't matter whatever it is, even if it's just what's a win for the week or what's a problem for the week, and then do some training from there. Do you hold monthly KPI meetings, activity and planning meetings individually? How are we tracking with the numbers on the right-hand side? Let's just go through our yeses. You might have already kept going ahead. The reasons why I'm trying to give you the background or the information and some ideas as to, hopefully you've got a scribble pad as well. You can sit down and say, okay, well, what else should we be looking at through these? Because asking about the meeting, I haven't really spoken about, I haven't really given you the agenda, but I'm trying to give you some background on how to run that meeting. The KPI meeting, the same thing. The start of each month, portfolio manager pulls out their reports and then sits down and should present back through to the department head or the principal and say, here is my strategy for the next month. This is what happened last month. Here's my next 30 days. Here's my next 60 days. And then the property manager should be running that. And the reasons why, and I go to so many offices and the department manager's printing out all the reports and giving them to the property manager. And then you wonder why when you say to a PM, how are you tracking with your lease renewals? They don't even know where to find the report inside of the data. We have to stop micromanaging individuals and keeping them suppressed. We have to train everyone and treat them as though they are leaders of that particular portfolio, and then get them to plan their month. And then the department manager really should just say, okay, well, that works really well. I could add some resources here. Maybe we're going to struggle with those numbers. Come back to me if you need some help, but otherwise, good plan. But at least at the start of the month, rather than just talking about what's happened last month. That's not a KPI meeting. That's just a report. So the KPI, what are we planning? What did we do last month? What's current this month? So what's the plan? And then what are we doing the next 30, 60 days? And it's the 60 days. And the property manager is the one that should be driving that. Because if the property manager doesn't have a plan as to how they're going to get through all of their activities, I could virtually guarantee you those things aren't going to get done. So out of 25, how did you track? So don't need to tell me. I just want to make sure that we're on par with those ones. As an industry, as an office, how did you go? Let's go to the next one. Property management database and software technology, category 3. Is there a way to record the principal place of residence of each owner and the state in which they live? Now, I'm not talking about, yes, we record the address. That's easy. But I'm saying, can I get a lookup of all the properties? And we should, if we're looking at this once, if we're looking at the proof of ownership, we're looking at the authority, we should be able to then flag whether, really easy for a property manager, is this a magistrate's application or is this a VCAT application? What dictates that? Well, the principal place of residence principal address, sorry, of the owner. And so how are we tracking that? So my suggestion is that you create labels, and I'm a big one for labels. Is there a way, an easy way to follow written procedure checklist workflow used to set up a new property, a new owner, and a new renter? So whether that's a workflow, a task, a paper-based tick and flick form, a checklist, whether it's and I ran a webinar a couple of weeks ago with regards to 4 key checklists that I use that I've built in Property Me, and then I've taken them out, put them into a Word document so you can put them into Trello, Colmeo, Property Tree. You can use the same things, but if you're not using checklists and you've got screenshots or videos, you really are leaving things to chance. So my question is there an easy to follow procedure to set up a new property, a new owner, and a new renter? And I don't mean have we trained someone. Is there a set system? And we'll go through these next ones really quickly. Is there an easy way to track the following? And so whether it's a tag, a label, a lookup, or some way. So can you find on every property, the ones on every property, and I'm not talking about as a general rule, every property compliant proof of ownership, the ones who live in New South Wales. So if I ask you to bring up a lookup today of every property in your portfolio that has a compliant proof of ownership, can you do that? Well, the flip side to that is that you then would, if you've got 100 properties and you've got 30 that say there's a compliant proof of ownership, there's 70 that are either non-compliant or missing. And so what you're looking for is we work through exceptions. So I firstly want to find the ones that are compliant. And you should be able to do that now. And again, moving forward with AML, anti-money laundering, which is not applicable for property management, but it is for agencies that do sales, we really should have a photo ID of the owners on file as well, so that we can cross check those. Can we check the owners that live in New South Wales? Can you look at all of the properties that are valid and assignable? Again, with the amount of DDs that I do, not one place have I gone into where it's already tracks these are assignable. I've just never seen it, and it's part of the process that I build into the systems with the clients that I work with, so that at any stage, if you wanted to go off and take the opportunity to buy out a small competitor, you might find that you're sitting in an area where a small agency, a 200 portfolio comes up, and you want to take that and you go off to Macquarie, and Macquarie says, sure, let me see how you're tracking now. And you come up and you say, I've got 1,000 properties. Click, click, click. All of these 1,000 properties are valid, enforceable, high fees. They meet the benchmark. Macquarie's going to love you. As compared to, I don't have any of this data. You have to do some investigative work. I don't know whether the authorities are valid. Macquarie's not going to be too happy. Missing owners instruction forms, authority to charge fees, authority for owners to manage smoke inspections, switchboard upgrade, swimming pools, electric systems. So tick, tick, tick. Can you find all of these now? Can you go into your property, into your portfolio, and put a report today for the entire portfolio? Property does not meet rental minimum standards. If the answer is no, then you're ticking no. Not do you have the label, but do you have that in place? So these are the things you'll be working on over the next 30, 60, 90 days in your office, going through and building out your reports, building out your software. If you're a Property Me user, I'm happy to chat with you about this because I'm a Property Me partner. If you're using Inspection Express, I also do a lot of work in Inspection Express. If you're a Property Tree, then I can help you as well. The other softwares I don't know as much, but we can still build workflows, labels, tags, those sorts of things. The basic premise is, can you pull the data out? Can you pull all this information out? If the answer is no, then your portfolio is not as strong as it needs to be. I spoke earlier about trying to be match fit. Landlord's insurance expired, electric embedded networks, advertised for lease, move in, move out rules, missing disclosure forms, missing bank account details, bond reference, all the properties where the owner's got their preferred trades. How do you track that now? What about the overdue bond lodgement dates? That was one of the things that last week the task force spoke about when I asked them. Thanks, Marissa. Console. I don't use console as much. Not console now. I used to use Gateway. That was a long time ago. And that was one of the things that the task force spoke about. And that was when I asked them the question last week, the head of the task force, I said, what is one of the most common things that you're finding that agents are still doing wrong that you're fining people for? And it was the bond lodgement, and bond lodgement not within the set period of days. And I then used the reference that I did a due diligence a couple of years ago where the longest bond that was lodged was 180 days. It's ridiculous. And the fine for that's $29,500. So can you track those properties? When was the last time you did an extract of an RTBA bond audit? And when did you should be doing bond audits every couple of months. Property owned in super. Why is that important? It has a very, very different information that you need to be putting into the rental agreement, like the ACN and the super trust details. And of course, you can't serve a notice to vacate for an owner to move in on a property that's owned in a super fund. So these are the sorts of things. Properties that don't meet the AMI, average annual management income, incorrect owner on authority, the amount of times where I'm going into audits. These are the things that you can be doing over the next couple of months. Pull up all your proof of ownerships. Check to make sure that your owner that's on the title verifies against what your management authority is, verifies what your property data says, and that all the information is correct. Why is that important? Because the last couple of events that I've been to from VCAT is they throw out notice to vacates if the authority, the proof of ownership, the lease are not all the same. Because you might have you incorrectly set up the lease, and now you find out you've got a different owner. and notice vacates are not valid, so they're throwing those out. RDRV, they're throwing those out as well. Is there a process in place where a second person, senior manager, is responsible to audit the data, compliance, and document storage for each property on a regular basis? I would suggest that that's a monthly thing that you go through and you have someone that's going through, whether it's a VA. Is the property management team provided all the tools, tech, and software they need to perform their duties to a high level? The amount of places that I go into and I'm still sitting there and we've got people working on 13-inch little laptops and not dual screens. So run with dual screens. Try and give all the data. If you're looking, I said Loom, give Loom videos. Make sure you've got whatever tech. And are you running training sessions? The number of training sessions that, and again, I'm a Property Me partner, the number of training sessions that Property Me run and all the webinars. There's webinars for Inspection Express. Vic Forms have got webinars. The REIV are running webinars all the time. If you're a member of the REIV, I MC a lot of those webinars for the REIV, and we don't have 3,000. I don't know how many members there are, but we don't have 3,000 people come to the webinars. You might get 30 or 40 people come to a particular webinar. Then you run a VCAT one, and you get 200. And so there is so much information that's available. Are you scheduling that as part of your training? Is there access to online training or a resource library to address the software that's most commonly asked? Now, of course, there's all of the portals will have their own training, but do you run that training? Do you have that in your office? Do you sit down on a Tuesday morning when there's a new release for, I don't know, Snug, they're doing a training, and are you sitting down as a group and saying, okay, we'll record that, and then we'll do some training, and then marking that off in a training manual? Why is that important? Well, one of the new parts of the changes to the legislation will be that agents are required to comply with CPD. And so, what we need to get on top of is how are we training our team and how are we tracking that information? And so, most agents don't have a training plan. Agencies, they don't have training plans. They've got no way of tracking it. You can track it in their staff file, but you want to make sure that you're saying, okay, we've all attended this training, and that's a good way for your CPD to be managed. Is there a focus to ensure that any information known to the agency is stored within the property trust software and/or Google? Is the information from the disclosure form recorded as a label, a tag, a note? How are you tracking all of this at the moment? If we were to go into all of the properties now and we were to find out how many properties had cladding issues, how many properties have got building permits for the property next door. How can you track all of that? It's too difficult there's so many moving parts for a property manager, hence the reasons why we have property managers, their heads exploding all the time. And every time I talk to a property manager, they're stressed, and rightfully so, because the agency's not organized in tracking data or repurposing information or providing VA support, administrative support, so that the PM can do what they're good at, which is speak to the people, speak to the owners, speak to the renters, manage the property. They shouldn't be managing the data, and the data knowledge should be there. It should be dished up to them. Is information from the Property Safety Inspection Authority recorded as a label or a tag? Are photos stored in the property trust software, photo gallery, to make it easier? And so, again, Property Me, there's a gallery inside of there. Property Tree doesn't have it. I'm not sure of some of the others, but all of the information that's relevant comes out of an ingoing inspection, that we've got the information: floorboards, ovens, oven type, gas, hot water system, where the smoke detectors are, what the locks look like, are the blinds sitting in there? Why not put all of that, collate all of that, and put it into the photo gallery sitting inside of Property Me? Makes life so much easier for a property manager. It's also really attractive when you're recruiting. You sit a property manager down and you say, here's a clean portfolio. I like it when I see ads and say clean portfolio. And there's some offices that I look at and I say, yeah, they've really got it together. And there's other offices I look at and think it's a train wreck. And then they're advertising clean portfolio. I'd like to understand what their definition of clean is. 37 points. How did you go with those ones? Okay, category 3, tracking along. We need to keep going on to the minimum standards. The next one. I'll fly through the next set as we go. Hopefully your numbers are doing really well. And again, if you're getting really high numbers, uh, be conscious that you want to make sure that, yes, you can comfortably say not one or two properties, the portfolio, the entire portfolio, you have a level of confidence. Are you confident that every property within the portfolio meets all 15 rental minimum standards, or in your opinion, do you believe that there are still properties actively managed within the agency that don't meet that standards? I could, I'd be very surprised if there was a yes in that one. Most officers have not got their entire portfolio across the board and have evidence, not like I spoke to that principal last week. He had 140 properties, and all of them just the owners had just signed a form, and that was his evidence. Has the agency created its own version of a rental minimum standards inspection checklist to use when picking up new business or conducting an on-site inspection? I'm not talking about replacing a third-party provider. I'm just saying, do you have an actual checklist? Does the procedure also include taking photographs and evidence? Is the agency charging a fee to conduct the agency conducted one? So my proposition is that when you're taking on new business, not your existing clients, you're taking on new business, charge to do a minimum standards walkthrough and charge the client. If you want to give it away free, by all means. But there's no reasons why your experience, your expertise, your systems, your processes, your checklist shouldn't be charged. There's absolutely no reason. The only reason you wouldn't charge it is because you don't think that you can. In addition to the inspection fees, is the agency charging a setup fee for rental minimum standards? And this is a new fee that I've introduced a couple of years ago, and clients are picking that up, $100, $110, just to set up all the rental minimum standards. The same as with the smoke, gas, and electric, charge to set those up because you're the ones doing all of the work. The clients are happy to tick for you, and they're outsourcing for you. They'll pay for an electrician to go and pay for a $99 attendance fee, and then they'll pay for that easily. But then you go and charge $100 to do something else, and they kick and scream. It's about value. Has the agency and/or external third-party company conducted an on-site inspection to assess each of the 15 rental minimum standards for every property? Now, I'm not saying that every property has to have a third-party inspection. What I am saying is that every property needs to have an inspection. And that inspection is either done by the agency or is done by the third-party inspection. It doesn't really matter who, but you need to have some evidence. And that's, again, I was using the workflows in the workshop I did a little while ago. Is there a way to easily report on the inspection and the compliance status of each of the properties? Tick now. So right now, have you set up the data entry to allow you to extract a report that shows every property with a compliant minimum standards report? So can you go into your portfolio today and pull up a report and says, of my 100 properties, X number are compliant, or of my 1,000 properties, 200, whatever it is, X number are compliant. Can you do that easily? Because if I was the director of CAV and I knocked on your door this morning and I said, I want to come and have a chat with you about your properties, that's what you're going to need to be able to do. So you need to be able to have this access, and it's really easy to do with a little bit of thought. And again, I'm happy to show you on this one. I've done this for hundreds of agencies where we're using labels. Right now, have you got the data entry to allow you to extract all the reports that say that I've got a non-compliant minimum standards report? Why is that important? I've got one particular office where we manage this. My team managed this for for the principal. It's a small office. It's a solopreneur, one director, and then we manage all the compliance for that team. And so every time that the property manager, the principal gets another report, she sends it through to our team. We do the audit, and then we set it up and we set up all the labels. So she's just confidently being able to say, okay, we've got compliant, non-compliant, and we're working through the entire portfolio to get 100% compliance on that portfolio. Right now, have you set up the data entry to allow you to extract a report that shows every property that has not had any inspections whatsoever? You should be able to do that. And for some offices, it'll be 100% of your portfolio has had no inspections. Right now, have you set up the data entry to allow you to extract a report that shows every property that you can and cannot advertise online due to the rental minimum standards? And so what I've been doing is, of late, with the new standard, new reforms that come in next week and the advertising standards, I have a label which says advertising compliant rental minimum standards, advertising non-compliant rental minimum standards. Why is that important? Because I don't want to, as a principal, I don't want to be able to allow that to be a property to be advertised without a note in there. So we've gone into the entire portfolio for one particular office and put no advertising online for every property. And now, as we're working through them, we're taking it off and putting, yes, it can be advertised. Really, really important because we just don't want to end up with a fine. Has the agency provided specific training for the staff to understand what the rental minimum standards are? I received yesterday another text message from a property manager saying, here's a photograph of some training that we went to. I didn't think that this particular lock was right. We've been told a different way. What do you think? And there's still conjecture around locks. And have you run training on that one? And you want to make sure that you've got some photographs. So in our training, what I've done is I've gone and I've taken a whole series of photographs of locks that are compliant, put them into our Trello board. All the ones that are non-compliant, I've put them onto another list and put those in there. So at least there's some comparisons for our PMs. But my question to you is, have you done that? For another office, I took, there was probably 25 property managers. We went out into 3 properties that were vacant, that were being advertised, and all 25 property managers, we did a little bit of a caravan, sorry, not a train, caravan, and went to the properties with our checklists. Every person had a checklist, and they walked through and they did a rental minimum standards inspection on the 3 properties. We then went back to the office and we sat down, and as a collective, we went through and said, right, property 1, locks, did it comply? And it was either a yay or a nay. We went through, and it was interesting to get the different perspectives. We're all in the properties together. We all saw the same thing. We all saw the same property, same features, but we came up with different conclusions. So that's what the training is. But actually, on site, if you haven't done that with your team, it's advantageous to do so. Do you have a current valid written rental provider minimum standards declaration on file? If not, then it's really important that you have that. Can you pull that up as a report? Are you 100% satisfied that every property currently advertised for the new tenancy complies with all 15 standards? If not, if CAV came in, you need to be able to provide that evidence. So on 4, we've got 16. Out of 16, what did you come up with? Here's my checklist. Here's the rental minimum standards checklist that I've came up with, which was a variation of the one from the REIV about 4 years ago, and it's got all 19 standards moving forward, which is the draft proofing, the cooling, insulation, and we've got our different variations on heating as well. Property safety compliance inspections report management. I'm hoping that you're getting an idea here now how easy it can be to either do an assessment of where you're up to, figure out what's working well, what's not. And again, I would encourage you to be more stringent rather than generous with your questions, with your responses, because then you can grow from that and put together a plan. As part of the suite of prescribed owner documents, have you got a compliance inspection authority for every property for smoke, gas, and electric if you've got pools and pools as well? But the authority needs to be to the agency, not using, as 32, is the agency using a property safety inspection authority provided by a compliance inspection company, detector inspector. If you're going out and if you're using, because I'm seeing this all the time, is I'll go out and I'll do an audit on an office and I'll have a look at the file and I'll have detector inspector authorized for smoke, gas, and electric. And then I've got a task force a report. And I go back to the team and I say, what's happening here? And they say, oh, no, we changed suppliers. And so, okay, well, that's fine. But where's the authority? Like who? You've got an authority for detector inspector. The owner's giving you an authority to use detector inspector. You're using Smart House or Task Force or someone else. If there's an issue, what have you done? Like you need to get an authority. So what I suggest is don't ever use an authority from the agency. Only use ones from your office. And if you haven't got that, then it's really important. Is there a valid current written instruction for each property for your smoke, your gas, your electric? And again, pools probably not applicable for your pools if you don't have those or you do a lot of apartments. Next one, is there a process to easily identify and create reports and lookups of the status to make sure that you know where we're up to with regards to inspections, whether it's labels? Does the agency have full control over the management and the scheduling of the inspections, and has the responsibility been outsourced to the service? What do I mean by that? Well, I go to so many offices where they tell me that, oh, the inspector, let's just use Rick's sends me a list every month of all the properties that needs to be inspected. And it's not being managed inside their portals. It's not being managed inside the software. It's being managed inside the supplier's portals, which allows for so many risks. So then when you jump onto the portals, you see all the ones that are expired. They've contacted the tenants, but they just can't get access. Here's this next thing which came up in the last two training sessions I've had with Consumer Affairs and VCAT. Does the agency have specific written authority from the renter, specifically permitting them to provide the renter's contact details to the supplier to arrange access to conduct the compliance inspections? That came up as a real issue because there's been a few scenarios where at VCAT has there's been issues around getting access to the property for smoke, gas, electric compliance, and the renters' phone numbers were given out to suppliers with no permission. And so you need to have written permission that you can actually give the contact details out. Something which I've only just picked up myself, relatively new. So I'd be surprised if an office has that. And I don't mean your privacy statement. I don't mean that. It's specifically for trades. If you're sending out an electrician to go to a property and you want the renter and the trade to liaise together, you need written permission from the renter that you can give those details out. Otherwise, you've got to access the property through your keys. Interesting one. Is there a strict office policy to ensure that the most recent property safety inspection dates are recorded on the disclosure? Are the dates there? Are you 100% satisfied that the most recent safety inspection dates are supplied to every renter on the ingoing condition report? Are you 100% satisfied that any recommendations or non-compliant items to the disclosed prior to offering a rental agreement or a lease renewal? And so I see this a lot where, yes, for a rental agreement, it's being proposed, but not for a lease renewal. Are you 100% satisfied that your owner or the agency could provide the renter a copy of the safety inspection reports within 7 days if the renter requested it? I've not seen an office that is able to do that because a lot of them have got, they leave the reports sitting inside the portals of the owners, of the suppliers. Is there a strict office policy to ensure that as part of the lease renewal procedure, that the most recent safety inspection dates and compliance are openly discussed to the renters? So we've got that one. I'm going to keep flying through here. Someone's got their mic on. Don't know who that is. Do you have a written service agreement with each of the suppliers you recommend, including storing copies of their business registration, contractor agreements, and copies of their public liability and indemnity insurance on file? I know when we set up a new supplier, we get those, but the renewals, very rare that we've got those sitting there. And again, if you've got an example where there's a fire, and we had one in a property that I was involved in with the agency last year where a house burnt down. And so the first thing that the fire brigade and the inspectors and insurance companies they want is, okay, when was the last inspection done? Who was the company? What are your agreements with them? You're the one that coordinated it as the agency. What's your contractor arrangement with that supplier? Where's their insurance? And the agency looks very, very silly if they can't provide all that information. Is there an office policy to ensure that every compliance report is physically read by the VA or the agent prior to renaming the document? Do you have a procedure to record when the owner has declined authorities? So that's really important because that happens. Are there any owners that have completely declined the safety inspections altogether? Hopefully not now. And again, moving forward, smoke alarms for all properties, irrespective of the date. Do you believe there are any properties within the portfolio where the owner has elected to manage the inspections themselves and the property is currently non-compliant? Either they're missing the compliance reports or where the inspections are past due and the owner's failed to complete the inspection. Are you 100% satisfied that every property that is offered a rental agreement has a current compliance report? 100% satisfied that every property currently advertised online for a new tenancy has a compliance report for smoke, gas, and electric. So these ones are the ones that are advertised and the one above. So 42 is for the ones that are leases, 43 are the ones that are advertised online. Given the amount of administrative work, are you using VAs? If you outsource to VAs, who's checking the VA's work? Is the property safety compliance status of the properties within each KPI, is it part of the portfolio analysis every month? Is that what you're doing? So do you sit with your PM and say you've got 35 properties that have got non-compliant smoke alarm reports? Can you do that with your PMs? They should know that themselves. 26 is the points. How did you go with that particular one? Staff training. Has the agency provided internal training? Leasing teams, we're just going to run through those, the Form 3, the privacy statement. I was with an office just recently and I asked them about privacy statements, and they said they have a privacy statement sitting on the kitchen bench when any person walks into an open. And I was a little bit shocked at that one because privacy statements should be prior to the person entering into the property. And so they should be either at the front door, near the screen, to the left of the front door. That's where your privacy statement should be. Your Form 3 should be there as well. Because once they've already gone into the property and they've given you information, they don't know what the privacy statement's relevant for. So that just didn't make any sense. And so officers, again, they're not following that. So you're tracking the listing to ensure that it applies. So F, is there a way of auditing and tracking each online listing to ensure that it complies with the ACCC requirements? Advertising standards. Has the agency provided internal training sessions with the leasing team? What you're allowed to ask, what you're not allowed to ask. And again, particularly with regards to your bank details and so forth. But moving forward, there will be a prescribed form. It's not in yet, but moving forward, there'll be an actual set document that CAV will put together. Just didn't last week. They just said they haven't done it. That's why it's been put on hold. Otherwise, it's actually part of the law, but it's just CAV haven't built the document, and then it has to go through to the portals for it to be put in place. And so, what we need to be able to do is make sure that there's training in and around that. Is there a procedure in place to destroy unsuccessful applications? Again, spoke about that. Is there an easy access list of FAQs? So work through that. Does the agency provide an easy to follow new employee onboarding and training program for all new team members, tracking their ongoing learning and development? And so this is going to be really, really important moving forward. Do you have a training plan for your team? Do you have a CPD rollout? Do you have for the next 90 days, what trainings involved? Are there REIV webinars? I know there's a few free ones for members coming up on the rollouts. There was training last week. Are you tracking, as a principal or a department manager, are you tracking the CPD compliance of the staff right now? Where are you putting that? Does the agency provide an easy to follow staff professional development and training plan? If not, then it's really important that you start to build one out. Even if it's just a Word document to start off with, start to build out your training plans, because moving forward, you're going to have to be able to comply, or the PM will have to comply. New South Wales does this really well. Each principal is required to make sure that their staff comply on the 1st of July every year, that they've met their CPD. If not, the principal is the one that gets the fine. Does the agency provide an easy to follow digital operational procedures manual? Check on that one. Schedule ongoing internal software training. Again, have you got that in your diary already? Have you got a training plan with regards to Inspection Express, REIV webinars, Property Tree, Colmio, whatever it may be, whatever providers you have? When's their next training schedule, and is that locked in for your team? Is there a training plan for the agency? Why is that important? Whether it's the franchise group or REIV or whatever it may be, this should be put down. You can apply if you're an REIV member. You can apply for 1 hour of credit, and they'll give you a half hour because it's a 1 hour, 90-minute session. They give you half if it's not an REIV. If it's not an REIV session, you can apply and say, I've done some training here with Michael, and you apply for the CPD and they give you half of the time. So we've spent an hour and a half, they'll give you 45 minutes of CPD points. As long as you tell them what the framework was, you can do that with any of your training. You go to a conference, you go to a session, go to a webinar, watch a webinar, that's part of your CPD. Does the agency provide employees with regular feedback and guidance through performance reviews? If not, performance review is really, really important. Is there a 6 to 12 month career plan? Staff retention. I'm going to run a workshop in a couple of weeks' time on staff retention. because as we come into Christmas, there's always movement in and around with staffing. So staff retention's a big one for November, December to start to work on. But career plans, performance reviews, monthly KPIs, regular property management meetings, tracking your CPD professional points. Is there a documented written staff retention strategy? I ran a workshop for PPM. It was a keynote presentation. I had about 70 people in the room, and I asked them to put a hand up for who has a written, documented staff retention strategy within their agency. Zero hands. Zero hands in there. So if you haven't got a staff retention strategy as part of your business plan, build one over the next couple of months. If you're responsible for the HR recruitment, put together a staff retention strategy. Really, really important. So out of the 20 points, how did you go? APMC, the Property Management Forum. This is a really good place to share information, but it's certainly not a place where you want your staff learning from. This is why it's important that you have training plans. Your VAs, as we're getting close to 12 o'clock, I want to make sure that I get through as many of these as I can. Do you currently outsource administrative tasks and property management support to offshore staff? Is there written procedures, workflows, blueprints, checklists, training and videos for every task? If not, again, use Loom. Set up Loom, send them, get them to build a Trello board if that's what you want to use. Trello's free. Get them to take the Loom video. They can take the transcription, put that into put bullet points, build an SOP, and now all of a sudden you're starting to build yourself an onboarding board, a library. So when staff come on board, or if you change your VAs, you've got now the VAs training the VAs. Is there a secondary process? Make sure you check your VAs work. Don't just rely on them to do the work. Same as your PMs. Someone should be checking. And then also go back through and lock in set dates with your VAs. So, mate, and I've got this Wednesday mornings I tend to do. Wednesday morning every week, 9 till 9:30 PM, the VA needs to pull out the gains and losses report, archive any properties, add new properties, but archive, and so clean up the portfolio every Wednesday from 9 to 9:30. And that's set. It's in the diary 12 months out, and it's just a recurring task. So these are the things that you want your PMs to do. If you don't currently outsource tasks, can you see that there? That should be an E. A task within your workload you could delegate to free up. If you want some information about that one, let me know and I can help you out with that. I train VAs all the time. So the 6 points in there. Okay. Category 7. Rental providers, education. Are you comfortable that 100% of your rental providers are prepared to pay for all the compliance? Or are they paying for a third party? So tick that one. Have you created a series of FAQs or mini training, educational videos for your providers? So put these online, set them up on your website. Not only here, and I've got here A, B, C. Have you run online webinars for your owners and other agencies, rental providers to upgrade them on ongoing rental performance? Why not do a live 4 to 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon? Put it live in your community groups, in your area, in your suburb, and say that I can see Steve McCleary here, Hodges South Hodges Paran running a webinar on the rental reform, a webinar on the rental reforms for all of our clients and all agents, all owners that have properties in Paran, Malvern, South Yarra, Turak, and happy to help you out. And then run it live and then get people to come along. Run it free, run an event, use it as a lead generator, but become the educator in your scenario. Run at client events or an information night, and then start to put. Have you actually started to talk to your owners around the 2027 minimum standards changes? Why is that important? Because if your owners are planning on selling, you want to make sure that they're selling through you. And 2027 is where the cost's going to be, particularly around cooling. Have all your owners provided supplementary documents with regards to proof of ownership, photo ID, owners corp, those sorts of things? Properties owned in a self-managed super. Do you have the trust deeds? Have you got that? Again, anti-money laundering, you're going to need that next year. Hopefully you're working through the checklist. I've tried to give you and pad out as much as I possibly can. If we were sitting down and we went through this workshop, and we would go through the whole thing. I'd be interested to, you've probably already gone ahead, but I wanted to make sure as we go through here, suggest that you create a whole series of training videos. Put those videos onto your website. Become the go-to person. Put them onto YouTube and put the link on websites. So you actually, in your area, become the educator. So category 8. There's 13 areas. I'm not going to get through them all now. There's 13 areas within the business that you really should be looking at to make sure, and you've got the checklist inside of here. As I said, I want to try and pad out as much as I possibly could. It's a 3-hour workshop. I'm trying to get it down into 90 minutes and get through the 218 points. So here's a couple of suggestions as I wrap it up now. I'm going to stop the sharing. You can go through and finish off the rest of, where are we inside of here? Just going to come back through speaker gallery. So you can go through and finish off the rest of, I'm just mindful of being here for 12 o'clock. You can go through and finish the rest of your checklist, put together a little bit of a bullet point training plan. What I'll do is I'll record the last couple of sessions as a V2. I'll go through and record 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Send those through so you've actually got those. But I wanted to be able to hand it over. And if there was any questions, if anyone wanted to jump on live and ask me any questions about any of the process or what they should do or how they can try and implement this into their business, by all means, feel free to pop your camera on and also feel free to pop your mic on. I'm going to have a little bit of a drink as we're a couple of minutes out. Has anyone got any questions at all? Is everyone there? So maybe in the chat, what's the area of the most concern do you think moving forward? Has anyone actually popped inside of the most? There we go, Joe. You going to come on live, mate, or not? Can't hear you.
Is that better?
That much better. The microphones work better that way.
I had to duck out, so I'm looking forward to watching the video. But yeah, there's some brilliant thinking points here.
And you found as you went through there, was there things that were obviously we've had a few conversations. Was there anything that stood out to you that you looked at and you went, okay, I need to add that, I need to add this, I'm missing that.
Oh, look,
Anything that stood out?
what stood out was the quantity of things, because you know it, but you're not doing it.
Yes. Absolutely. And the reasons why this perfect time of the year is that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think that there'll be a lot more, I'm sure there will be a lot more Christmas parties and hopefully we get some sun, a lot more late lunches, and it's an opportunity where your owners are starting to kick back for the rest of the summer. And then you'll lose somewhere between the 15th and 18th, maybe that last third week in December until around the second week in January. There's a couple of weeks in there which are a bit of a void. There's not a lot that happens. Great time if you are here and you're not closed. It's a great time to be sitting down and saying, okay, well, how do we roll our sleeves up and get stuck into some of these tasks that we really need to be rolling out for 2026?
The killer for me is I didn't realize that my old man had signed up for this, and we're definitely going to have a beer over the next 2 months. And we could have sat down and solved all the world's problems, and I didn't even have to attend the webinar.
I did see that. I did see that altogether. Yes, mate, I did. Because you've got your dad, I did see that your dad, John. I'm going to stop just on the off chance that you say anything nasty and it's not recording. You don't get a Christmas gift.